So, years ago, Melissa and I, when we adopted our son, Josiah, we actually brought him home. We got to bring him home when he was 2 days old. And we had only found out about him just a few months earlier. And so after we found out about him and found out that we might have a newborn, we started to study. We just went into research mode, right? Like, I was a youth pastor. She was a children's pastor at the time. And so we knew the statistics about raising kids. We knew that the first 3 years, some of you don't know this, the first 3 years are the most important years in the development of a child's moral, mental, emotional health. And that those 3 years, we knew that that was going to shape, it's not going to shape, it's not going to shame him, that was going to shape his life. And we knew that you can teach a child what you know, but you're gonna reproduce who you are. And we knew that. So we were way more concerned with preparing what was inside of us than preparing his room or his crib. And so we watched a ton of videos on preparing for parenthood and being parents, and we read books, and we crammed as fast as we could. We did everything that we could to prepare ourselves to be enough to raise this child. And then he was born. And it was amazing. We fell in love with that little guy. He was little then, now he's like 7 feet tall. But then when it was time, they just gave him to us. Like, maybe you parents remember what this was like. I just remember thinking, like, why would they trust me with this little fragile human, right? It was a little bit, no, it was a lot. It was overwhelming to think that we were responsible for keeping him alive. Like, I can't believe they just they told us how to change his diaper and they said, take him. Like, I'm like, I don't feel equipped. I don't feel ready. Like, God, I don't know that I'm gonna be able to pull this off, right? And I looked at myself, my experiences, lack of experiences, my knowledge, the little bit that I had. And even though I had studied and I had crammed and I had prepared the best that I could, I looked at what was ahead of me and I just thought, look, there is no way that this is going to be able to cover that. Have you ever been there? I mean, I think we've all been there. We've all come to these places in life where, if we're honest with ourselves, what's in my hand is not going to foot the bill for what's ahead of me. Right? For some of us, it could be a marriage. You could be married and you love him and you love her, but you suddenly realize that they brought some family dynamics, some baggage. You didn't bring any, but they brought a bunch of baggage. And you're thinking, I don't know that I have the ability to manage this. Right? Or some of you, you're entrepreneurs, right? You started a new business, and good for you. And everybody, because everybody tells you that that's just total freedom to own your own business. Now you can take vacation whenever you want. Like, you don't have a boss anymore breathing down your neck. And so it's just going to be bliss and freedom from now on because you started a business. It's just rainbows and sunshine. And all the business owners are snickering because you soon found out that it's anything but that. And you're thinking, like, what's in my hand? And once you get in, you start asking, I don't know if this can do that. So it happens to us in all kinds of different ways. Kids who are addicted, parents who are aging, the past traumas that we've been through. And so today we're actually going to study an account from the Bible all about when you feel overwhelmed. When I realize what's in my hand is not sufficient for what's ahead. And this is actually the fourth message in a series that we've called More Like Jesus. And in this series, we're talking about how we can study Jesus' life and some of the things that we can learn from him to be able to be more like him as we navigate through our everyday lives. And so if you've missed any of the previous messages, you can catch those up, or you can catch up on the Church Center app, Spotify, YouTube, all the places. But for today, if you have a Bible, whether it's digital or paper, turn with me to the Gospel of John, and we're going to be in the chapter 6 pretty much the whole time. And I want you to see if you can visualize this story, because it took place on the shore of the Lake of Galilee, and right next to the lake was this mountainside, and that's where it took place. And so here's what it says in verse 3. It says, so Jesus came up onto this mountainside we're talking about, and he sat down with his disciples. So it's him and the 12. And the Jewish Passover festival was near. Now that's interesting that he throws that in there, because why would John tell you about this festival? It's because thousands would gather every year in Jerusalem to celebrate this festival that was called Passover. And this festival was to celebrate when God delivered them from slavery in Egypt. And every year, the festival was actually to point them toward the coming Messiah, somebody that would come and deliver them once and for all. And some of them believed to save the day and throw off the yoke of the Romans who were oppressing them so that they could be free. And that's why there's so many people here. And they're so interested in what Jesus is doing, because they're wondering, could this be our Savior? And so Jesus is there with his disciples. He's teaching them, and he looks up and he sees all these people, a huge crowd coming toward him. And he looks at one of his disciples, Philip, and he goes, hey, Philip, where shall we buy all the food for all these people to eat? And then I learned this from Jesus, is Jesus always asks, or not always, but many times he asked questions he already knew the answer to. For he already knew what he was going to do, but he's testing. He wanted to know. Here's what he was doing. He wanted to know, are they thinking ahead? Do they have a vision bigger than themselves? Or are they thinking about every situation as an opportunity, or are they just thinking about themselves? Are they just thinking about survival? Asking questions that you also already know the answer to, it actually challenges people around you to see if they're thinking for themselves. Okay? So Jesus is testing Philip. And for some of you math nerds, it was actually a math test. Somebody groan. Philip was the very first disciple that followed Jesus. Way back in John 1, Philip follows Jesus and then brings other people to Jesus. And the only thing we really know about Philip is that he was good at bringing others to Jesus. And Jesus is testing him. He's saying, Philip, I know that you bring individuals to me. You can do that. That's what's in your hand. But what about the crowds? Do you believe that I'm enough to bring the crowds? So much bigger than you? And then Philip answers him. He's like, okay, so Jesus, it's going to take more than half a year's wages. Imagine what that is for you. Half a year's wages to buy enough for every person just to have a bite, not even a full meal. And he's right. This is a huge crowd. See, Jesus chose 12 men. They followed Jesus closely. They lived life together. And so they all kind of knew how much money they had. And so Philip is kind of alluding to, we might not have enough money to write the check for this bill, Jesus. In fact, it's half a year's wages, and that wouldn't even give everybody an appetizer, much less the main course. And even if we do have that, Jesus, do we really want to spend that feeding people? And then Andrew, another one of his disciples, Andrew's listening in. And Andrew speaks up and he says, so Jesus, here's a boy with 5 small barley loaves and 2 small fish. But how far is that going to go among all these people? Andrew, he was so close to thinking beyond what was in his own hand. He was at least looking for options for Jesus. But then the reality of the situation set in. And he backs up and he stops. And he allows the natural to limit his thoughts about what Jesus could do within the supernatural. So this little kid, he comes with his lunchbox. Just 5 little loaves. And that's not a loaf of Wonder Bread. That's not loaves of Wonder Bread. These are small dinner rolls. And they were made from barley, it says. Poor people ate barley loaves, not wheat. All right? Wheat was for the rich. And so this kid, he's actually from a lower income family, and Andrew finds him, and And he just has some bread and 2 little fish. The fish, scholars believe, were like sardines. So 5 little barley loaves and 2 sardines. This was basically a little boy's lunch. It was not going to feed a crowd the size of this. Philip has already done the math on the finances. And he's thinking, Jesus, like, this is a lot of money. And I'm not even sure Judas is holding the bag and he's stealing stuff. So we don't even know, if we have this much. This obviously is not going to do it. And in that, they failed the test. Because the math problem they looked like this: 5 loaves plus 2 fish divided by 5,000. And that's not 5,000 people. It says that was 5,000 families, 5,000 men, not including the women and children. So because when they counted the men, they were counting the heads of the household in that day. And so 5 loaves plus 2 fish divided by 5,000 people or families is not enough. And they realized what I think so many times in my life. And that is that what's in my hand is not enough for what's in front of me. It's just not enough. And so I look at this formula and I think, you know what? I can relate to that in my life. If what's in my control, if what's in my ability can't take care of what's in front of me, then I don't move forward, right? I mean, and listen, if you're talking about your budget, that's probably a good rule. If you can't afford it, don't move forward, right? And maybe in business, that might be a good rule. But when you're talking about your faith and God's calling you out to do something for him, just because the challenge is big does not mean you should not be bold. Because the problem with their equation is that they were missing something in the equation. There was something or someone important missing in that equation. And you know what that was. It was Jesus. They only looked at what they had in their hands. They forgot to consider who was with them. And so Jesus is going to insert himself into their equation. Watch this, verse 10. Jesus says, so just have the people sit down. And there was plenty of grass in that place. And so they all sat down. About 5,000 men were there, not counting the women and children. So Jesus, they're like, we don't have enough, Jesus. And he's like, just have everybody sit down. And so then they could all sit on the side of the hill and they could hear Jesus preach, because there was this hill. It was this perfect location for a sermon. But they weren't just coming for a sermon. They thought he was the Messiah. They were excited about anybody that could come and potentially free them from the Roman oppression. They were excited about anybody that could feed their families who were poverty-stricken. They were excited about anybody that could heal them, as Jesus often did. And so this was at the end of a long day teaching for Jesus and a long day of healing, and now he's going to spend the afternoon and the evening feeding them. Watch this. So Jesus then, he took the loaves. He's like, have everybody sit down, bring me the food. And he gave thanks. He distributed it to those who were seated as much as they wanted. And he did the same with the fish. Now here is an amazing fact. You have this resource. You have something in your hand. And just like the little boy, we can see that the miracle does not happen by what you have in your hand, but by what you hand over to him. Listen, I don't want you to miss this. I'm going to say this again, and I want this to sink in. The miracle doesn't happen. Think about yourself and what you're capable of. It doesn't happen by that. It happens by when you're willing to lay it down at his feet. It happens by what you're willing to hand over. And in that moment, Jesus tests Philip. And as he tests Philip, he invites him into the miracle. And today, he's inviting us into the miracle as well. If we'll just hand over what we have that we know is not enough anyway. And Jesus is saying, I can't do the miracle when it's in your hand, when you're trying to do it all on your own. But I can include you in the miracle if you give me what you have. It could be my self-worth. It could be my time. I give it to you. It could be handing over the tithe that already belongs to him. God, I just give it to you and I trust you. Whatever it is, Jesus just wants us to depend on him. So much of it, what he asks us to do, we don't understand. It's all about dependence. It's all about trust so that he can do something extraordinary with it. And I'll let you look in your own mirror, but this is so convicting to me because looking back, I wonder how many miracles could I have been a part of? How many adventures could I have been a part of if I just realized that the miracle was not about what I had in my hand, but by what I handed to him. And so Philip, he hands over what he has to Jesus, and Jesus doesn't just do a miracle, he makes him part of the miracle. Watch this. So when everybody had enough to eat, all those people, those thousands of people, Jesus says to his disciples, gather up the pieces that are left over. Let's not waste anything. That's a whole nother message. So they gathered them and they filled 12 baskets with the pieces of the 5 barley loaves that were left over by those who had eaten. And what it shows us is that the formula that we saw, 5 plus 2 divided by 5,000, is not enough. But when you put Jesus in the equation, it goes from not enough to more than enough. Jesus is the X factor. He is the X factor in your life. Amen. And I've got to ask you, we've got to ask ourselves, do we really believe this? Because we hold on real tight to our own stuff, our own ability. And to some of us, God has been saying, if you'll stand out in faith, if you'll hand over what's on the inside, what's in your hand, I can make a miracle out of it. And where you're not enough, I will make sure there's more than enough. There will be leftovers. Think about couples struggling in their marriage. Maybe that's you, and you're seeing the struggles that's before you, and you're seeing what's in your hand, your own abilities, your skills, your love, and it's just not enough. But if you let Jesus enter your marriage and you hand that over to him, it'll be more than enough. Even to the point that it runs over, that you could bless others. You have baskets full. A child, maybe you have a child with addictions or a learning disability or anxiety or relationships that they're struggling with, and you're just thinking, I'm not enough for this. You think as a parent, you look at what you have and you're just like, I'm not enough. I don't have enough bandwidth to deal with this. You're not telling anybody, but you're thinking this. I don't have enough wisdom to deal with this. Maybe I don't have enough money to hire the counselors. But here's the thing. If you hand over what you have to him and you trust him with your children, you'll have more than enough. If you're an empty nester and you're thinking, I can't disciple younger families because I don't have enough. I didn't do everything right. But if you give Jesus what you've got in your hands, he can make it more than enough. Because here's the thing, the little in your hand is more than enough when you put it in his hand. When we're willing to hand over that area that we feel deficient in, that we feel inadequate in, then God is able to do amazing things because we put our trust in him. Isaiah 26 says this. It says, when we hand over the little in our hand, it says we can have perfect peace. Watch this. You will keep in perfect peace those whose minds are steadfast because they, trust in him. When we hand that area over to Jesus, whether it be the lunch, like the little boy, or a marriage, or a job, or a children, or a school life, or a parents, whatever, we can have perfect peace because we trust that he can take what is ours, what we give him, and do the miraculous. We can let him know, God, we're not anxious about anything because we trust you. In fact, Philippians 4, it reminds us, it says, don't be anxious about anything, which sounds trite, except for, he says, instead, by every situation, by prayer, petition, and thanksgiving, give it to God. We can give those things, those anxieties that we have over to him and be thankful that he knows our need, that he knows my struggle, the area of my life that's hungry, and that we can trust him. And that we're not just called to hand over our cares and anxieties, the things that we have, but we're not just to give them to him, but we're to throw it off. Watch this. It says, throw all your anxiety on him. Why? Because he cares for you. This word cast, it means to fling something with great force. Like if you were stacking hay bales, you would take that heavy hay bale and you would heave it. Anybody throw hay bales? Yeah, a handful of us. You could throw that. It's that same idea, is that you fling it off. So the thing is that Jesus is telling you, your shoulders are not big enough to carry the burdens that you're trying to carry on your own. It's going to eventually break you if you try to carry it on your own. So he's saying, please let me carry it. Cast it onto me. Take that load and heave it with all your might and let him carry it for you. But exactly what problems and what cares are we supposed to throw onto him? Some of us, we feel like we deserve to carry those. But the Apostle Paul, it says, no, you're to cast all of your anxiety on him. And the word used here for anxiety in the Greek, it means any hardship, if you've got hardship, trouble, complication, that are a result of problems that develop in your life. That covers a lot. Cast that on him. Throw it on him with your marriage, with your finances, at school, at work, anything that makes you anxious or concerned. It means anything that causes you worry or anxiety, regardless of why it happened. That is what you need to throw onto his shoulders. He's saying, I want it. Don't hold it. I want it. Nothing is too big or small to talk with me about because he cares for you. And some of you need to hear that. He cares. And that word cares, it means to give meticulous attention to. I want to tell you, Peter uses this word intentionally because Jesus really does pay meticulous attention to you and the things that weigh heavy on you. In fact, he gives attention to everything that happens to us. The Bible says he knows every hair on your head. For some of us, that's easier than others, but he's watching. Those anxieties, those difficulties, he wants to transform those into something absolutely amazing. Remember Romans 8:28. It says this, that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. Do we believe that? That whatever it is, when we release it and we hand it over to him, he's going to work it and turn it around for good. Because we love him and we surrendered to him, but also because he's a good father that loves us and has called us for a purpose. And we also see in Proverbs 3, it says, trust in God with all your heart. In other words, give it to him. Don't lean on your own understanding. And in all your ways, submit to him. And what happens? He'll show you the way. He'll make your path straight. When we trust in him, that what's in our hand, when we give it to him, it becomes miraculously more than enough. When we trust in that, I'm telling you, life changes. And I want to encourage you, put it in his hands. And so this week, I want us to take Proverbs 3 and then combine it with Romans 8:28. And this is what I want us to pray over ourselves this week. Will you pray this with me? I trust in you, Jesus, in every situation. I don't count on my only what I know, but I submit to you, and you make my paths straight. Thank you for working everything for my good. Amen. Pray that. And I think about what kind of church we could be together if all of us just took one step toward this level of submission to God. Would you hand over what's in your hand so he can make more than enough out of not enough? And look, there are 100 ways that's going to happen for us. And for some of you, I mean, you're looking at that and you're going, hey, that's my biography. I've been through tons. I mean, this is something that you've already been doing. because you've realized you're not enough. I mean, there have been some extraordinary givers and some extraordinary service in this church. There's some of you that are sacrificially giving what you have in your hand, and God is doing absolute miracles in your church and in your community. And there's some that are taking the time and energy, the little that they have, and they're placing it in his hands and in his church. And it's making a difference in the lives of people that come here, the people we get to serve. And this family church, it's where we are today, not because we're so good, but because God is faithful. Because we just hand over to him what we've got, and he does the miraculous. And there's been a whole legacy of people handing over to God and seeing miracles happen. We get those praise reports all the time where God shows up and he does amazing things because we just hand it over to him. Jesus invited Philip into the miracle by testing him. Who's next? Who's going to stand up and say, I'm all yours? Maybe for you, your next step is to give Jesus your life to begin with and be baptized and publicly profess your faith in Jesus. We're baptizing next week. You could stop by the next steps table. But listen, I don't know what the Holy Spirit is pulling on your heart right now to do, or what he's asking you to turn over control of. But whatever it is, I'm telling you, he wants to take your little and turn it into more than enough. Even if it's just to change your life. So, remember, the miracle, it does not happen because of what you have on your hand, but by what you hand over to him. Will you stand with me?